Howdy folks, this is Paul, Infinite NES Lives. I just taking a minute to make a quick video on setting up the drivers and a alternate method for updating firmware on INLretro in case it gets bricked at some point. There's other methods, but this is kind of meant to be a one video to cover the majority of use cases, and a lot of this is already in the readme. So this computer is completely fresh. I'm going to try to get everything from scratch. So first we will get the software. So if you just search GitLab INLretro on Google, it comes up as a first hit. I'll put the link is on the sales page where you purchased it. Also, I'll probably put links in the description. So just going to download. We'll download this as the zip, save it. Let's see where it went. Oh, you can always do this. Downloads. So here it is. We'll extract all. It's just going to stay in the folder that it's at. We can go ahead and move it to the desktop, or I don't know, wherever you want it. So here it is. Let's cut this. Let's put it in users. All right. So we go into here, go into host folder, right? This is a trick. You can just click up here in the search bar. So wherever it is, and just type cmd, boom. That will pop up a command prompt in that folder. So we just downloaded it. The host folder, so here's all the files. Let's go ahead and open up the readme in Notepad. The host folder, that's where all of the software that's running on your PC is. There's a firmware folder. We'll touch some things in there. Shared folder, this is files that are shared between the device and your PC. So the arrangement of these things can't really change. You need to keep all of these things in one spot for the most part. So wherever you put that, you can make shortcuts, but everything needs to sit in that one spot. So here we go. Now, I'm just assuming that you have our latest one. Functionally, they're all pretty equivalent, depending upon if you have the connectors or not. And most of this should apply to future versions as well. So I plug it in, and we heard the little da-da-da. So there, devices and printers. Get that open just by clicking the Windows button and searching devices and printers, and that'll pop that up. So here we see the INLretro prog is detected by Windows. But if in the host folder, if we just run INLretro exe, the program is reporting that the device is open, or the device is found, but it can't open the device. Verified drivers installed. So we didn't actually install the drivers. So in the main INLretro folder, Windows driver package, and we just click install driver exe. This guy right here. Windows will want to make sure we're sure. And this little wizard comes up. Just click next. Finish. That's it. Okay. So hit up, enter, try again. Okay, so successfully found and connected to INLretro Pro. It tells me the device firmware version, and this is a common issue right now. We sent it some opcode that the firmware didn't understand, so the default script, we'll get into that stuff, but that's all we have to do to get the drivers installed. Now this new INLretro host application and everything is compatible with every kazzo INLretro that I've ever released or sold. But if you have one of the older AVR versions with the big chip on it, the big ATmega chip, you're going to have to update your firmware. And after you update your firmware, you're going to have to, I think the drivers changed when you do that, so you have to do that same process again. I'll get more into the older devices here, but the other thing I want to show quick is updating the firmware. Now, basically there's two classes, right? So there's the older AVR-based devices, and there's the newer. This is the smaller one with just an NES connector. You might have got this one from NESMaker Kickstarter. So there's the older versions with the big ATmegas, the AVR based, and then there's new ones that are STM32 based. So the firmware updates between these two are a different process. So I think it's actually easier. Let's just do the old one first. These are all pretty much the same. The position of the switches, you got the reset switches on the older are in the same spot. The bootloader switch moved on the oldest one to the newer one, but anyway, probably used to this if you have one of these devices. There's a BL run switch, so we'll set that to BL. So if you have one of the newer based AVRs or the newer based STM32s, this doesn't apply to you. I'll put timestamps to different, you can kind of skip through it, but so if we put it in BL and we connect it, now the LED should not be on if we're in BL mode. This switch only matters though when you plug it in or after hitting reset. So if we go to devices and printers, right here, HID boot. So there's no, when it's in firmware update mode, there's no drivers that are needed. It's just an HID device. So to update old devices to the latest firmware for the latest software, you go to AVR bootloader, I think. Yeah. Okay. So all we do is we use this bat file with this switch in bootload. Windows wants to make sure I do it. It does this little count through the flash size, and it'll reset itself when it's done, and the LED will be dimly lit. So one kind of basic way that you can tell which firmware you're running is the state of the LED when it turns on. So it went ahead and reset itself, and it's INLretro Pro now, but the switch is still in BL. So we need to take it back to run. That way, now whenever we plug it in, it'll be INLretro prog. So if you have the very oldest Anago compatible firmwares, this LED I don't think ever turns on. So if the switch isn't run and you plug it in, the LED is not on at all, it's probably the original kazzo firmware. If you plug it in and the LED is brightly lit, then it's probably my version that I was using when these first started shipping, and it's only compatible with my older, that little mini application. I'm not gonna try to show that, but that was what was the firmware that was shipping when these were shipping. But now these old ones are still compatible with the new stuff, and it's dimly lit, and that kind of tells us that we have the latest firmware. So once this finishes, we can just hit any key to continue. Just to show you an example. So if I forget the switch in BL, right, it'll say error opening HID boot device, specified device was not found. See, it's not listed here. If you can't find HID boot in devices and printers, then this isn't going to work. It needs to be seen there. So one more time just for grins. Okay. So if we run INLretro, it found it and it connected. The version I happen to have attached, this is version 2.1. But anyway, so now the older AVR based devices are compatible with, or it will work with all the new INLretro software. Functionally, it's pretty equivalent to the newer devices, except it's slower and you don't have as many connector options. So old ones, NES, Famicom, and Super Nintendo, but the connector pitch on the Super Nintendo is not ideal. It's not great for dumping. You might be able to get it to work, but the newer one fixes that. So that's updating AVR based firmware. Now let's do the STM32 based firmware. So in the readme, I've got all of these things already listed out, installing drivers. That process is the same for both devices. Okay. So updating device firmware, I've got separated out between the STM32 based and the AVR based, right? And I talk about different things, but first thing you need to do is get the software. Oh, you can go directly to ST, but I think you have to create a user account to do it. Accept cookies. To download it from ST, you would go here to get software. Accept. See, it wants me to log in. I already have a login and everything, but you can make one if you want and get the software, or you can just use the link that I provide to a Dropbox copy. This is what we want, these things here. So download these. Extract all. All right. So diffuse demo. Go ahead and install this quick. Sure. Now this method for updating the firmware should always work. I have it designed in there so that if you somehow brick your device, it's not being recognized via USB, something crazy happens, it's not working, this is your best bet. Try this, and if this isn't working, then yeah, we're gonna have to figure out what's up. Okay. So, similar to the old devices, there's a bootload switch and reset. The newer ones, so the current version, there's two buttons here, right? There's one that's recessed and there's one that's raised. The recess button is supposed to not be that easy to hit. That's the bootloader button. The one that's raised, that's further away from the edge of PCB, that's the reset button. So you can easily hit the reset button. The bootloader button is harder to hit. Now, slightly older version of the INLretro 6, there was a tactile button for a reset and then a bootloader run switch. And it's possible, and if you have one of the older one, or not the older, but the NES only ones, the ones that are going with Kickstarter, I don't even bother putting the switch on there because there was a mistake with it. You shouldn't need it, but you can still use this process. You just need to use the tweezers. And if you got a version from NESMaker that had a big NES enclosure, you might not have these switches. So I kind of walk you through it in the README. So we have to get the device into DFU mode, which is this bootload switch. And so here I kind of talk about which version you probably have, depending on when you got it. So for the one with the recessed, if you got a 3D printed enclosure, with the reset button, with the recess button, it's easiest if you get something pointy. So this switch, the position of this switch or jumper only matters when the device powers up. So I'm going to hold the bootload button and plug it in. Okay, so Windows recognized something. Let's go see what it was. See, it says STM32 bootloader. Here's another way you can do it. You can hold the bootload switch and tap the reset. That also worked, right? So this switch only matters when it powers up via plugging in or you hit the reset button. So that's how you get into bootloader mode with those versions. With the last version, it was just a switch. So it says BL or run. So BL is towards the USB connector. I'll put it in BL and I'll plug it in. Okay, STM32 bootloader. There it is. Now, if you don't have that switch, right, you're gonna get something like a tweezers or a paperclip, and you can connect the two pads. There'll be 3 holes there. I'll maybe put up a picture. Okay, so this is just a quick insert, easier to show with my phone than the webcam. For if you have the NESMaker version or the NES version without the switches. So NESMaker, you can actually, there's a hole in the bottom. Probably can hardly see it, but if you connect those 2 pads inside there, when you plug in the USB, that will get you into bootloader mode. Alternatively, pop this guy open, and there you see where the switch would have been.
I guess there was actually clearance in there for that guy could be soldered in there. I didn't think there was going to be, but anyway, so the bootload position would be here. These two connected. Connect those. Plug it in. STM32 bootloader. And similarly, for this one, the silk's actually wrong. It's these two that need to be connected. Basically, opposite of the resistor. The resistor connects the those two pins. These two need to be connected while you connect the USB cord. Those two right there. So connect those two and plug in the USB cord.
STM32 bootloader. There it is. So I'm going to go back to these guys. Hold the bootload button, plug it in. Windows recognizes STM32 bootloader. Now we go to STM, so the diffuse demo that we just installed. Available DFU devices. So it says okay, so if there's nothing there, nothing shows up, right? But if we have it STM32 bootloader, then it's just picking the device that is found. All right, so updating the firmware. We're gonna go to this upgrade or verify action, and we're gonna go click on choose. So we will go to the location of our INLretro master program master folder, firmware. All right, so there's a DFU release folder. Here's where I release, or I make a DFU file for the firmware versions that are released. There's two main different versions. So PCB INLretro 6 and INLretro NES. So this guy is a smaller microcontroller because it doesn't have as many connector pins. So the firmware there is a different build than the big 6 connector. So as of right now, there might be future versions with just Game Boy or something, who knows. But for right now, you either have an INLretro 6 or an INL NES. So this is the 6 connector version. The latest version right now is this version 2.3.1a. So you just open that file and you can click verify after download. It'll verify it and click upgrade. So it's saying the device was plugged in DFU mode and possibly sure this is the correct device. To continue, yes. Unless you have other STM32 devices, which you would probably know what you're doing anyway. All right, verify successful. So it's still showing up as STM32 bootloader. You can click leave DFU mode, or you can hit the reset button, or you can unplug it. So it looks like it doesn't actually, it left DFU mode, but it's not, USB needs to reinitialize. So we'll just reset it. There, INLretro Prog. We'll do it quick one more time. But for the NES only, short those guys out. STM32 bootloader is recognized. Diffuse demo sees it. choose, so this is an NES connector only, so INL NES, PCB 2.0N, right? So we'll do that one, open it, upgrade, yes. All right, verify successful. So not all of these have reset buttons. You can just unplug it, plug it back in, and there we go, INLretro. So it's connected. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to show. I will. Trying to think. So it's not a NES game, it's a Famicom game, but same difference. Choplifter, plug that guy in. All right, so this is the current method. It is likely to change, especially when I have a GUI up and running. But main thing is close some of this stuff out. So scripts, the scripts folder. So INLretro host scripts. By default, whenever you run INLretro exe, it will call the INLretro.lua script. So you can open these with Notepad. Notepad's not amazing because it doesn't have highlighting. So it's hard to tell like what's a comment and what's not, but the standard INLretro.lua, basically you're programming, you're telling it the firmware to do everything inside this script. So we have an error because we sent a N64 command because the last version I happen to have saved was doing something with N64. INLretro 2, and I'll make this the default one shortly if it's not already. INLretro 2 does some things much better, thanks to Max. So we can tell which script we want to run with the -s flag. So scripts INLretro2.lua. So remember, we're running in the host folder, so that's where everything is referenced to this directory. So we'll send the -s for scripts. Let's just go ahead and send -h for help. So here's just some help with commands. So we're going to use -c for NES. NES and Famicom are the same functionally, it's just the connector is different. M for mapper, this is NROM. We need to send it. So let's look up. So for NES, go to bootgod database. Here it is. So we want to dump this game, Choplifter. Here she be. So mapper. NES mapper 87? Oh, this isn't an NROM game. Oh, I thought it was. I think I have Dig Dug. Yeah, let's do Dig Dug instead. Dig Dug. All right, so this is mapper 0. This one has 16K byte prog and 8K byte CHR. So X is 16 for prog size, minus Y is CHR size for 8, minus D for dump, and where do we want to put it? Well, let's just go ahead in the host folder. Let's make a new folder, ROMs. So we have a ROMs folder. Now we can say ROMs and digdug.nes. Boom. That seemed like it took kind of a long time. Open. Not that. Where'd she go? There we go. Host ROMs. Probably got a dirty connector. Give it one more shot here. It's working, so it looks like the prog dumped. Yeah, clean your connectors, boys and girls. Anyway, that's kind of how to get started. And at some point I'll get around to getting a graphical interface going. There are some already out there that different users have made. The host software is open source, so feel free to do as you please. And check out some things other people have done. But yeah, so that's all I have for this video. Yeah, new computer up and running with INLretro. So thanks for supporting what I do, and I will feel free to reach out to me if you're having issues. I do my best, which honestly isn't that great right now with everything going on. But hopefully this helps. So take care.